one of the dangers in playing superheroes is that you find yourself in the same position as the editorial and publisher role, in which they're basically exhausted and they say, well, we got to pump some air into this. Well, guess what? The very next, the next arc, you're not going to believe the dimensional disasters that are going to occur.
Right.
You won't believe the next arc when this villain comes back and we've totally retooled him. Check out his new costume design. He's going to be such a badass this time.
Right.
And as I like to say, for some reason, saving the universe from from the very fabric of time and space being torn asunder late in play, for some reason is never just as much fun as when you stop the guy from blowing up the gas station.
Right.
So do you see what I mean by empty escalation?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the biggest problems with relying on improvement or the implied expansion of attention and of situations to sustain longer play. The media itself, the media themselves show us that this can be, kind of a pain. Michael Moorcock is lauded for his multidimensional cataclysmic novels. Frankly, I think the more Eternal Warrior he got, the worse and more boring he got. And that his best stories were the Elric and the Quorum stories that were pretty much written for that character in their way, in the problems that they faced and had personal outcomes.
Right.
And that as soon as he started, weaving his monster tapestry, that's kind of when I'm like, all right, this really isn't very good. Well, personal judgment as far as that author is concerned, but I think the principle is sound, at least to say, if we're going to be playing and developing this material for a very long time, escalation of effectiveness and situation is not really the guaranteed path to enjoyment. So our question is, what does make long-term play fun? Certainly encountering new things is part of it, which is why so many of them rely on running off to some other part of the map. And there's nothing terribly wrong with that. It's all a question of whether what you find at the other part of the map is doing something, good. I maintain that the concept of my inspiration cycle applies. Whatever just changed is now put into action as the new normal. And the question is whether the new normal has properties that excite you of their own. Whether the new normal, that is how much my character has changed, or whether we've gone to a different place on the map, or whatever, you can choose. The question is whether that really you look at it and you're satisfied that it came out of what you already played, and you are pumped about its implications that previously did not exist. Are you excited about what did not exist before as a potential feature, problem, imaginable material of play? Are you excited about that now, especially because this particular batch wouldn't exist unless we had played what we played and did what we did? The causality of the new normal is fun on its own. The question then is whether the new normal has enough to it that you're happy to go around in the cycle and start, another unit of play. There are many different venues for this that haven't really been tried. Few, if anybody, have tried interesting things like playing backwards, linearly, session by session, adventure by adventure.
Right.
Few of us have tried things like we're going to play exactly the same scenario that we just played, only now we're playing different characters that were only barely glimpsed or were the characters we played before never even saw. Both of those rely on treating what was just played as a constraint, which really, actually, even though they sound bizarre, really isn't very different from just moving ahead in time.
Right.
Because that's constrained by what's already occurred too. I know that sounds crazy, but it is actually true. And we know from prose literature that those devices have been done many, many times. That many of what we think of as series or epics were in fact written backwards and sideways.
Right.
Rather than just first through last. And we also know that deliberate rewritings of the same situation over and over again is considered, sophisticated literature. It's considered art.
Right.
So what do we learn from this? We learn that what makes sticking with this material fun needs to, it's like so many things. It cannot be simply, you can't simply give some reward in the game to do it. It seems as though you should. It seems as though you should say, well, okay, everybody goes up, you got plus 5 points, or you get this, and you can pick 2 of your characteristics to get a +1, and you also gain, your choice of this batch of spells that you couldn't do before. And you're like, oh, goody, I go up. I get to go again. I've got these new things. It is well worth asking, when is that fun? And the answer is, it's fun when you can feel as though your character did enough, that they had enough identity now that you're going to pick and feel that you're picking the right choices, not just anything.
Right.
And second, that you're looking at the result and saying, I could play that. I want to see what it's like to play you now. Now, what about now I'm sticking right now with your classic GM, players build scenarios, players encounter them kind of thing.
Right.
In that case, what about our poor game master? Oh, man. God, running those 4 levels that we just did just about killed me. Yeesh. Oh, looks like we succeeded. They're excited. They've built up their characters. They're hungry for more. Shoot me now.
Especially when there's that one guy who's really mad about something. Stop talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with playing in the paradigm of I please you. You all arrive. There's 4 or 5 of you. My job is to please you. Well, guess what? Someone's not pleased. Welcome to hell. Yeah. But that aside, I'm talking actually about the enjoyment of the material on its own. Speaking as somebody whose longest form games were, until not that long ago, superheroes. I basically just had to embrace the villains as my characters.
Right.
And if I was as pumped as what they were up to now, that they wouldn't be up to unless what had happened, then I swiftly fell into other traps that were not as fun and involved too much effort toward story control. Trap number 1, what I just mentioned, escalation. And you're like, look out, the fabric of time and space is ripping. And they're all like, yeah, right, show me the foe. I don't give a shit. Yeah. And you're like, wait a minute, what happened? Remember when everybody was so excited about saving the gas station? How come it's not the same? That's one problem. Other problem, the seduction of time travel. All of a sudden, you're writing a time travel story and trying to be clever and, drawing your circles and arrows in your different decades. And then sooner or later, you take the players learn that, so that guy is really that guy's father, not his son. And you're like, look at my brilliant time loop that I did. And for some reason, it's just never as exciting to them as it is to you.
Right.
And so that's sort of the other big seduction. And then, of course, there's the classic alien invasion, which has the problem of, again, they really used to care about who, Dr. Meat was. Figuring out the identity of Dr. Meat and stopping his, serial murder spree was really important to them for sessions. But, an armada of winged aliens with, cool, you just love that old picture of, of Triton back in the Teen Titans, when he had two eyes right here, right? And, and then you realize that those two lines that George Perez always drew over Raven's eyebrows, that he's drawn there the whole time, just these two flat lines, then they open and you're like, oh my God, right? So you give these aliens those eyes and they've got wings and everything. And, their armada shows up and it's threatening Earth and oh my God. And the players are like,
yeah,
really? You're like, but the princess might be on your side. And they're like, So
would you say the alien invasion trap is basically any sort of plot that doesn't derive from stuff the players have done or care about? Or is it?
Yeah, but that's too vague. It doesn't derive from whatever principles were operative in their excitement. I mean, it could be something new. It could be something you made up. But it is something that is thematically consistent with why they're excited to continue to play. And it's a very difficult thing to put your finger on in terms of this group and that time, because are they really excited to play, or are you just, have you a legacy of getting together to have fun this way, which is enough?
Right.
In which case, the design of the game really isn't an issue anymore.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about the enjoyment, let's look at that concept of operative principles. I've been using this a lot. I used it in the rewrite. I used it in the annotations for Sorcerer. And I've used it in the Champions Now design. And I've used it in a few other things, that there are a couple of fairly explicit concepts that we can always kind of return to. And even though we can escalate them, spin them, reverse them, defy them, look at them in a new light, whatever, they don't change for what we're doing here. What I guess I'm saying is that if you have some kind of operative principles that people are enjoying, and a lot of them really are quite explicit in the games that we know and love. A lot of things have these kind of real basic statements embedded in them. And if the game continues to honor those, and a sense of closure, final closure, has not been arrived at, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Many, many different things rely on local closure and enjoyment. Then you can sustain longer term play. I'm thinking about some of the games that I had that were quite extensive. Fantasy, superheroes, horror, a few things like that. And people often said, well, that was great closure for that. But since we had great closure for that, I'm excited to find out what kind of closure we get when we encounter this. And this having a relationship to the previous that. It has a thematic contrast to it. It's, it's got some kind of comparative or some kind of enjoyable comparison. Yeah, some kind of enjoyable comparison to the way we addressed it last time. And that's the problem with the alien invasion. It's got no comparison with what happened last time.
Mm.